Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this, the final night of Fervid Theatreworks' production of The Importance of Being Earnest. I'm Louis, and I am the co-founder of Fervid Theatreworks. We're performing tonight The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. Our all-star cast, our incredible cast, have been working on this show for the past 2 months, and we're now very proud to bring it to you 100% live. As a virtue of it being live, technical issues can, and indeed on previous days have happened. So please bear with us, please stick with us, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver a fantastic show for you today. The Importance of Being Earnest is our 3-act play. There will be a short interval in between while our actors can reset themselves. We'll take a short break in between each of those, but I promise we'll be done by 9:30 British Summer Time this evening. If you can't watch us today, don't worry. Replays of this stream will be available later. We'll put those out on our YouTube and on our Facebook. If you're tuning into us now, then you will be on one of those platforms. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please consider having a look at the other one to see if that's doing any better. We found it's been a little bit variable between the two of them. We are bringing this to you from a socially distant perspective. The reason we're doing that is because of the current COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. This is obviously a very difficult time for us all, and we want to be able to bring a little bit of joy to you now so that you can share it with others and experience all the fun that we've been able to have in this a very difficult time. With that in mind, we encourage you, there is still time to share this video around to all your friends, your enemies, co-workers, colleagues, people you like, people you really don't like, and I encourage you very heavily to share it as far and wide as you can. Lastly, before we get started, this is a community-supported production, and that means that we rely exclusively on your donations to keep us afloat. If you want to see more productions like this one, please do consider donating. You can join the ranks of many fabulous people who already have donated. A link is available in both the YouTube and the Facebook video description for you to find out how to do that. If you like what you're seeing, feel free to leave a comment on the show as we carry on. We'll be interacting with you along the way, and we hope you enjoy the show. So, that's it from me. I'm going to pass you over to our actors for Act 1 of The Importance of Being Earnest. Enjoy.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Oh, well, I'm sorry about that. For your sake. Now, I don't play accurately. Anyone could play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. When it comes to the piano, sentiment is my forte. I keep the science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, Lane, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see here from your book that on Thursday, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, that 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
And why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? Now, I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Oh dear, is marriage as demoralizing as all that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
Yes, well, I'm not sure that I'm very much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Yes, and very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, well, Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. I mean, really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, then, well, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Oh, how are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
Well, I believe it is customary at good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
And what on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
Who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
Oh, how immensely you must amuse them. Oh, by the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta.
No.
And Gwendolen.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well and good, but I must say, I don't think Aunt Augusta will quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
Well, my dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. In fact, it's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
Oh, then I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I'd call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
Well, I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted, and one usually is, I believe. But, well, the excitement would then be all over. No, the essence of romance is uncertainty. And if I ever get married, well, I shall certainly try and forget that.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for peoples whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there's no use speculating on that subject. Divorces were made in heaven. Please, don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
Oh, yes, well, that's quite a different matter, for, well, she is my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen, and Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is too.
Why, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. Why, you behave as if you're married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, women never marry the men they flirt with. They don't think it's right.
Well, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth, and in fact accounts for the enormous number of bachelors one sees all over the place. And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up this whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
You rang, sir?
Yes. Could you bring Mr. Worthing's cigarette case that he left here last time he dined with us? It's in the smoking room.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I have been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was nearly offering a very large reward.
Well, I wish you would. I am more than usually hard up.
There is no use offering a reward now that the thing is found.
Here you are, sir.
Ah, yes. Thank you, Lane. Well, I must say, Ernest, I think it's rather mean of you. But now that I look at the thing, I can see it isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You have seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read what is written in a private cigarette case.
It is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should and shouldn't read. Why, half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't quite the sort of thing one talks about in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Ah, yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you just said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is surely a matter that an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that all aunts should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For good heaven's sake, just give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to dear Uncle Jack. Now, there's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? Well, I can't quite make it out. And besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
Isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw. No, it's simply absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here, look. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B for the Albany. Here, I shall keep that as proof in case you ever attempt to deny to me that your name is Ernest, or deny it to Gwendolyn, or anyone else for that matter.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and that cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that still does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily calls you her dear uncle. Well, come on, old boy. You'd much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk as if you were a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on, tell me the whole thing. I must say, I've always suspected you of being a secretive and confirmed Bunburyist, and I am quite certain of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I shall reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression just as soon as you reveal to me why your name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Well, here it is.
Thank you.
Now produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle out of motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Ah, now where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
Yes, I had suspected that, my fellow, for you see, I have bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Dear Algy, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is never pure and rarely simple. Life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature, a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. Besides, you should leave that to the people who have not attended a university. You know they do it so well in the daily papers. Well, what you really are is a Bunburyist. No. I'm quite right to call you a Bunburyist. In fact, you are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
Well, you have invented this very useful younger brother named Earnest in order that you may come up to town as often as you please. Well, I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid by the name of Bunbury in order that I may go into the country whenever I please. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. In fact, if it were not for his extraordinary bad health, for instance, well, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for in truth, I've been engaged to my Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
Yes, I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing upsets someone so much as not receiving an invitation.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
Oh, I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the sort. To begin with, I dined there on Monday, and once a week is more than enough to dine with one's own relations. And in the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as, well, one of the family, and sent down with either no woman at all, or worse, too. And in the third place, I know exactly who she will sit me next to tonight. She will sit me next to Miss Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband sat across the dinner table. That is not pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. Why, it just looks so bad. It is simply washing one's own clean linen in public, yes? Well, besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, well, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, then I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly recommend that you do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing shall induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever do get married, which seems to me to be entirely problematic, you will be very glad to know him. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I ever saw that I would marry. And I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Well, then your wife will.
Oh.
You don't seem to realize, my dear fellow, that in married life, 3 is company, and 2, well, it's none.
That, my dear young friend, is a theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in less than half of that time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear boy, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives, well, or creditors, ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I were to get her out of the room for, well, 10 minutes, in order that you might have a chance to propose to Gwendolen. Might I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. Now, I hate people who are not serious about their meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Britnell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you're behaving well.
Oh, I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
Ah, now that's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Oh, dear me. Gwendolen, you're looking smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I would hope I am not that. That would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions. May I sit here?
Of course, please do.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call upon dear Lady Harbury. I have not been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit over here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers.
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
Well, Lane, that will do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm very much upset indeed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets at Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
Oh, yes, I hear that her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I of course cannot say.
Well, your tea, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
Well, I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that, well, I shall have to give up on the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not. You'll put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
Well, is a great bore and, I need hardly say, a terrible disappointment to me. But the truth is that I've just received a telegram saying that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again, and the doctors seem to think that I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I dare say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury make up his mind whether he was to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your dear uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement to his ailment goes. I should be obliged if you could ask Mr. Bunbury from me not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will inspire conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
Yes, I shall, well, I will speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if indeed he's still conscious. And I think I can promise you he'll be all right Saturday. Now, the music. It's a great difficulty, for, you see, if one plays good music, well, then people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, well, then people don't talk. But if you'll accompany me into the next room for a moment, I'll go over the list.
Thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the programme will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper and either look short, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe it is so. Gwendolen, you'll accompany myself and Algernon.
I will, Mamma.
It's a charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever anybody talks to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any other girl that I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact, and I wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. Well, the fact is constantly referred to in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has even reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love somebody by the name of Earnest. Oh, there is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Oh, passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
Oh, my own Earnest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you really mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and, like most metaphysical speculation, has very little reference to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candid, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. Oh, it produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say that I think there are much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they have all, without exception, been more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man named John. She would probably never get to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. No, I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But nothing at all has been said about marriage. You haven't proposed to me yet. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you, quite frankly beforehand, that I'm fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it. You haven't even gotten down on one knee.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Oh, of course I will, darling. Oh, how long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little practice in how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. Oh, quite blue. Oh, I hope that you will always look at me like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished with what, may I ask?
I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me. You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma.
In the carriage! Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mamma.
You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to inform you that you're not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I should be quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm pleased to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touched and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England in any case, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's life and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land ceases to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres, but I don't rely on that for any real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones who seem to make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Oh, well, that point could be cleared up later. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. I can get it back whenever I like, of course, with 6 months' notice.
The Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
She goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Oh, the unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Well, both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us, or come the evening at any rate. And now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I had said I had lost both my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that they seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
A handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. A somewhat large, black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
Cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. Yet I presume you note what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal some social indiscretion that has indeed possibly been used for that purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognised position in good society.
May I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make some definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I can possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? Oh, but what has this to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I or Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For heaven's sake, Algy, don't play that ghastly tune. How idiotic you are.
Oh, didn't it go off all right, old boy? You? Oh, I know. It's a way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolen is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is exactly, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. No, relations are simply a tedious pack of people with no idea about how to live. Or the slightest idea about when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
Well, all women become like their mothers. That's their tragedy. And no man ever does, and, well, that's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased. And at least as true as any observation of civilized life ought to be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. Wish to goodness we have a few fools left.
Oh, we do.
What do they talk about?
The fools? Why, about the clever
What?
people, of course. By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
No, the only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her, if she's pretty, and to someone else if she's plain.
That is nonsense.
Well, what about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have gotten rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but, well, it's hereditary, fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say something like, a severe chill.
Are you sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
What? Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest to be carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
Oh, but, I thought you'd said that Cecily was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I am glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays absolutely no attention to her lessons.
Well, I'd quite like to meet Cecily.
I should take very good care that you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I will bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they shall be calling each other sister.
Women only do that once they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear boy, if we want to get a good table of Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it's almost 7?
Oh, it always is nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Well, what should we do after dinner then? Go to a theatre?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
No, I hate talking.
Well, we might trot around to the Empire at 10.
No, I can't bear looking at things. It is so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
Oh. It's awful hard work doing nothing. Oh, very well, but I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't allow this.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
All right. I'll turn my back, but I won't be making a habit of it.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. I fear from the expression on Mamma's face that we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children have to say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever held over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and although I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she could possibly do will ever alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
It has a good postal service, I presume? It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn around now.
Oh, thanks. I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir. The afternoon post has arrived, sir.
Oh, bills indeed. A glass of sherry, please, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bunburying in Hertfordshire.
Yes, sir.
No, I don't think I shall be back until next Monday. Yes, you can put up all of my dress clothes, the smoking jackets, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow shall be a wonderful day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane! You are a perfect pessimist.
I'll do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Yes.
There is a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared about in my life. What are you so amused at?
Me? Oh, I'm just worried about the health of poor Bunbury. That is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury shall get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh? But I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Well, no one ever does. Now, you really must go and dress for dinner.
That was Act 1 of Fervid Theatreworks' final night of The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. We've got 2 more acts for you, but don't worry, we'll be all done by 9:30 this evening, British summertime. Just a reminder that this is a community-supported production of this play, and we rely exclusively on your donations to keep us going. If you would like to join the ranks of the many lovely people who have already made a donation, check out the link in the video description, both on Facebook and on YouTube. We've had no tech issues as far as I can make out today, apart from a slight delay here and there, so we're doing very well, and I hope you all are able to enjoy the remaining 2 acts perfectly well. I'd just like to wish a happy birthday shout out to Eric. I've had a special request to wish happy birthday to him. We'll take a 10-minute break now, and we'll be back just for Act 2 shortly. Take care, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all having an excellent evening. If you're just tuning in, you've missed an act, but don't worry, you can rewind the entire video to see the whole of The Importance of Being Earnest presented to you 100% live by Fervid Theatreworks. This is our first ever show, but it's our final night. Don't worry if you're not able to watch the rest of it today. We should be all finished by 9:30, but if you'd like to see this again, replays of this stream will be available in the future. So, all that remains is for me to remind you that this is a community-supported production, and we're dependent entirely on any donations that you can generously offer us. If you're interested in joining the ranks of the lovely people who have already made a contribution to us to help support future shows, this is not the end of Fervid Theatreworks by any stretch of the imagination. You too can make a donation by following the link that's in both the YouTube video description and in the Facebook video description. So, without further ado, I'm going to take you back into the show. I'll reintroduce you to the cast, and we will start Act 2 of the show. Enjoy, everybody.
Cecily! Cecily, surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours. Especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. And besides, I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German as he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is to be commended in one so comparatively young as he, who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that's why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
But I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to visit here sometimes. You might be a good influence on him, Miss Prism. You know, geology and geography and things of that nature influence a man so much. I should write that in my diary.
Do not think that even I could produce any effect. A character, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favour of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. Now, you must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I'd surely forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles things that have never happened and could never happen. I think memory's to blame for all the 3-volume novels Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are! Oh, I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned.
What made you give up?
No, I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid.
Oh,
To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has actually just been complaining of a slight headache. It would do her so much good to perhaps go on a short walk with you through the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. And in fact, I was thinking about that and not my German lesson when the rector came in.
I thought I heard some rumbling, but I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I am afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees.
Sure.
Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
You do not look for him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go so far as the school and back.
Delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, and horrid German!
Mr. Earnest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Well, ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you'd better speak to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
Never met a really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I worry that they'll look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You're under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I'd see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Earnest.
Oh, you mustn't think that I'm wicked, cousin Cecily. I'm not really wicked at all.
If you are not, then you've been deceiving us in a really inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been living a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, yes, of course. I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now you mention it, I've been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, but I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
Oh, it is much pleasanter to be here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
Oh, well, that's a great disappointment. I am obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment in London that I'm, well, anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
Sadly, no, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you'd better wait for Uncle Jack's return. He wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to town to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He's got no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I would sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you had better choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I've received of both this and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, dear Sesame.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not. That's why I would like you to reform me. You might make it your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
That is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
Oh, I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
Oh, yes, that's because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one could not do so on an empty stomach. Won't you come in?
Yes, thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I find I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marischal Neal?
No. I would sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Sesame.
I don't think it can be quite right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Oh, well, Miss Prism must be a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
Yes, they are a snare that any sensible man would be happy to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I'd like to catch a sensible man. I don't think I'd know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear Doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green.
Oh, green?
I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the school?
Worthing?
Mr. Worthing!
We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Ernest dead.
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Oh, poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow. Oh.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him in the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Oh, charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to draught. Oh, will the internment take place here?
Oh, no. He seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would wish, no doubt, for me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, at confirmations, christenings, days of humiliation, and festal days. The last time I delivered it was at a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the upper orders. The bishop, who was present, was very much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, of course, that you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often tried to speak to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Well, but is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
Oh, but surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have.
Huh?
Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Oh, not at all, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I think, advisable. Weather is so changeable. What hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred in one of the outlying cottages of your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
No, I don't see much fun about being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will no longer intrude on a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Jack! Oh, I am so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Did you go and change?
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? You look as if you've got fake. And I have got such a surprise for you. Guess who is in the dining room? Your brother.
Not dead in person.
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Don't say that. No matter how badly he may have treated you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake his hand, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it is perfectly absurd.
Here he is, Uncle Jack.
Good heavens.
Brother John, I have come down from town in order to tell you that I'm very sorry for all the trouble I've caused you. And that, well, I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be some good in somebody who leaves London to sit by a bed of woe.
He has been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Oh, yes. He has told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that, well, all the faults were on my side. But I have to say that, well, I find Brother John's coldness to me to be peculiarly painful. I'd expected a warmer welcome, especially considering that this is the first time I've ever been here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest right now, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? Oh, I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful task today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel so very happy.
Algy, you young scoundrel. You must get out of here as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I've put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay for more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has just been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called anywhere at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
Oh, my duty as a gentleman. That has never interfered in my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, isn't Cecily a darling?
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you just go up and change? I say it is perfectly nonsensical to be in deep mourning for a man who's really staying in your house A guest for a whole week? I'd call that grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week, as a guest or as anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly couldn't leave you so long as you're clearly in mourning. It would be most unfriendly of me. If I were in mourning, you'd stay with me, I suppose. Well, I'd think it very unkind of you if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anyone take so long to change and produce so little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am, occasionally, a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to leave by the 4:05, and I hope you will have a very pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
Oh, I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you on a nice drive?
He is gone to send me away.
Oh, then have we got to part?
Yes, I'm afraid it's a very painful parting.
It's always painful to part from people whom one has just been introduced. To part from long-time friends one can endure with equanimity, but to part from someone who's just been introduced to you is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope that I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the absolute personification of perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. In fact, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to copy your remarks into my diary.
You really keep a diary? I'd give anything to read it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's thoughts and impressions, and obviously made for publication. When it appears in a volume form, pray order a copy. But please, Ernest, do go on. I delight taking down from dictation, and I'm quite ready for more. Ernest, please, don't cough. When one's dictating, one should speak clearly and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I gazed upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you, wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly.
I don't think that you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't quite make sense now, does it?
Oh, Cecily!
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week, at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you're staying on to next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy! Of course! Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months,
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But, when did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism, and one much spoke about must be attractive, for there must be something in him. And you dare say it might have been foolish of me, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Oh, darling. But, when? Was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to settle the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under that dear old tree there. And the next day, I bought this ring in your name and this true lover's knot bangle that I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you these? Oh, they are very pretty, aren't they?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It is the excuse I've always given for you leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
Oh, my letters! But, my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Well, do let me see them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after we broke off our engagement are so poorly spelled and so moving that even now they bring me to tears.
Yes, but was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I'd done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it wouldn't have been a serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, what a perfect little angel you are.
Oh, you dear romantic boy. Do sit here, won't you? I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Oh, yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You will, never break off our engagement again?
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. And besides, of course, there is the mention of your name.
Yes, of course.
Oh, you must not laugh at me, darling. But it has always been a girlish dream of mine to marry somebody by the name of Ernest. Yes, there is something in that name which inspires absolute confidence. And in fact, I pity any woman who's married and whose husband is not called Ernest.
Yes, but my own dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had, well, some other name?
But what name?
Oh, well, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Oh. Well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling. I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, I think it a rather aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, you couldn't love me.
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I feel I could not give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, well, I suppose, thoroughly versed in all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasubal's a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
Yes, I must see him at once about a most important christening. on most important business.
Oh,
Now, I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th, and I've only met you today for the first time, I think it rather rude that you should leave me for so long as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
Oh, what an impetuous boy he is! I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Well, pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax? That must be one of the many elderly women involved in London with Uncle Jack's philanthropic work. I don't quite like women who are involved with philanthropic work. So forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name's Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. Oh, what a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short amount of time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am pleased to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is just as it should be. I believe that the home is the proper sphere for the man. And indeed, when a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes a man so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You're here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no. I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. Oh, I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to say that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I think that whenever anyone has anything unpleasant to say, they should be quite candid.
Yeah. Well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age.
Oh.
Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty to him would be as impossible as deception. But even the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it didn't, history, well, would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, but did you say Ernest?
Yes,
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian.
had a brother.
I am sorry to say that they've not been on good terms for quite some time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems almost distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. Wouldn't it have been terrible if any cloud were to pass across a friendship like ours? Now, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing that is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason I should make it a secret to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think you must have some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I am afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
Well, it is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel anywhere without my diary. One must always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but it is clear that, well, I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he's clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy has found himself in, I shall never approach him with it when we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? Oh, you are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than one's moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
Well, I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is clear to me that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual. Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? Oh, I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that's why you live in the town.
Oh, quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here as the people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Oh, this is what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I hear the aristocracy are suffering with it very much at late. It's almost an epidemic amongst them, I'm told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you, detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Ooh, bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Merriman, hand that to Miss Fairfax.
Oh, 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 you have filled my tea with lumps of sugar. And even though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. Oh, I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent boy from the machinations of any other woman, there is not a length to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
Seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am intruding on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar nature to make in the neighbourhood.
Oh, Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask you if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Oh, thank you. Oh, you may kiss me now.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is my Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest.
Oh, my own love.
Oh, Ernest, a moment. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to that young lady?
To what young lady? Oh, good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean, to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Oh, thank you. You may kiss me now.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh!
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked.
Really?
But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
Gross deception has been practiced on the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, won't you?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn. Cecily. It is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It's the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite candidly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the slightest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Oh. This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Hmm? Oh, yes. And a perfect, wonderful Bunbury it is, too. In fact, the most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
Well, that is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist, good heavens.
Well, one has to be serious about something if one wants any enjoyment out of life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth you are so serious about, I have no idea. About everything, I should imagine. You know, you have such a trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in all this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite as often as you used to, dear Algy, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to go up to town quite as often as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her.
No, I wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is none of your business.
Well, if it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then only at dinner parties.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble I can't quite make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would get on my cuffs. No, one must eat muffins quite calmly, for it is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
Well, when I'm in trouble, eating's the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in very great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately would tell you, I refuse everything apart from food and drink. At the present moment, I'm eating muffins because I am upset. And besides, I'm very fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason that you should eat them all in that greedy way. Give them to me.
I wish you wouldn't. I wish you'd have tea cake instead.
Good heavens!
I don't like tea cake.
I suppose a man may be able to eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to eat
I
muffins.
said it was perfectly heartless of you, under the circumstances. That is
Yes, well, that may be, but the muffins are the same. Give them back this instant.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having had some dinner? It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does. Well, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be named Earnest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable that I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It's very different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened already.
Quite so. So I know that my constitution can stand it. Now, if you're not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say, I think it's rather dangerous of you to venture on it now. It might make you very unwell, and you can hardly have forgotten how someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
Oh, yes, well, it usedn't be, I know. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Oh, that is nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you're The muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There's only 2 left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake!
Well, then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you must have of hospitality.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I have not quite finished my tea yet. And besides, there's still 1 muffin left.
That was Act 2 of The Importance of Being Earnest. We're going to take another 10-minute break, but don't worry, we're going to be all done by 9:30 this evening, so that's half an hour from now. We'll take a short break for our actors to get themselves set up for Act 3, which is, as I say, shorter. I just want to remind you all before we go on our break that this is a community-supported production, and we rely exclusively on your donations to keep us going. If you want to see more shows like this is not the end. You may see more by donating towards our cause. If you want to find a link to do so and join the people who already have, the link is in the video description on both Facebook and on YouTube. We're coming to you live for our very last night of The Importance of Being Earnest. That means that hiccups could still happen between now and the end, but we're doing absolutely brilliantly, so we're really, really pleased. I'm going to let the interval start now, and then we'll be back in 10 minutes' time. Take care, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. This is it. This is the final act of our very last run of The Importance of Being Earnest. We're very excited to bring you the end of this. One quick reminder again from me that we are entirely funded by your donations. You can find links to do so in the video description, both on Facebook and on YouTube. We're coming to you 100% live, so we're excited just to round this off and then have our own little party at the end. We're looking forward to that. Don't worry if you're not able to make the end of this show. You can tune into the replay after the fact. That will be available, immortalized on the internet forever. So we're looking forward to seeing people pay attention to that. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass you back over to the cast, and they're going to give you Act 3 of The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. Enjoy.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
Oh, they're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
Well, in order that I might have had a chance of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. That does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is no time for German skepticism. The explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief has said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as somebody else. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names
are still an insuperable barrier.
Insuperable? That is all?
Our Christian names?
Is that all?
We are going to be christened.
This afternoon.
Yes.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk about the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Oh, darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Heavens.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have not undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards to Algernon. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury's somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury's dead.
Dead? When did he die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury, oh, he was quite, exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation.
My dear Aunt Augusta, what I mean to say is that Bunbury was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury couldn't live, so, well, so Bunbury died.
He seems to have had a great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action, and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that goes on seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected to any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervase Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspires confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby and Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is often to be seen at dinner parties. So far I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the English and the German variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see. Though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favour of premature experiences. Come along, Gwendolen. The time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
About £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing, a moment. £130,000. And in funds. Miss Cardew seems the most attractive young lady now that I look at her. You girls of our present age have any real solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, my dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we could soon alter that. A thoroughly experienced French maid can produce really marvellous results in a very brief space of time. Indeed, I remember recommending one to young Lady Lancing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months nobody knew her.
Kindly turn around, sweet child. No, not all the way round. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. Yes, the chin a little higher, dear. The style largely depends upon the way the chin is worn. They are worn quite high just at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world. And I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that.
Yes.
But of course, my dear, you must clearly understand that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of letting that stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Oh, thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also call me Aunt Augusta for the future.
Oh, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Yes, thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, may I say, ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the truth is that I do not at all approve of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I have just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brew 89, wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the first that I don't have a brother, that I never had a brother, that I have no intention of ever having a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I've decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct of you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come over here, my dear. How old are you?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, I dare say that it will not be long before you're of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So, I do not think that your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair to tell you that, according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily would not still be more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There'll be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I love punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Well, then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states that she cannot positively wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be perfectly aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come along, my dear. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Ah, Mr. Worthing, everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious.
Wait.
Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell will be highly displeased if that was the way in which you are wasting your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Mr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views which I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, As your mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will retire to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I am on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to myself and Lord Bracknell. Is this Miss Prism a female of somewhat repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon.
She is nigh.
I have been waiting for you there for an hour and 3...
Miss Prism, come here. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell,
Why?
Miss Prism, 20 years ago, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. Under the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police Service, the perambulator was discovered standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of more than usually revolting sentimentality.
Oh.
But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I'd written during my few and occupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag. Oh.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I must know where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
You need hardly suspect, Dr. Cherishable. I need hardly tell you that in families of high positions, strange coincidences like these are not supposed to occur. They are hardly the considered thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. Sounds as if it was having an argument. I dislike arguments of all kinds. They're always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
Oh, I do wish he would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes. Here is the stain on the lining that received through the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here, is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Oh, and here on the lock are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm so delighted to have it unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother!
Oh, Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Married? I do not deny that that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? If not an act of repentance, wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. Lady Bracknell is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly tell me who I am?
I am afraid that what I have to tell you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother. Then I have a brother after all. I always knew I had a brother. I told you that I have a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I have a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel, you'll have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I'll admit that, but, well, I tried my best despite being out of practice.
My own one. But what own you? What is your Christian name, now that you have become somebody else?
Good heavens, I had quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the question had better be settled at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, have been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the General's Christian name was, but I've no doubt he had one. He was an eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were barely on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army lists of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The General was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I've no doubt that his name would appear on any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Generals. Malone, Max Pome, Magley, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs. Moncrief, Lieutenant, 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, General, 1869. Christian names. Ernest, John. I always told you, Gwendolen, my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest after all. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now. The General was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I knew from the first that you could have no other name.
Oh, Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
Oh, my own one.
Letitia.
Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at last.
Oh, Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, for the first time in my life, I now realize the vital importance of being earnest.
That was The Importance of Being Earnest, presented to you by Fervid Theatre Works. That's it. That's our show. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for sticking with us. We've had an absolutely amazing time presenting this to you. Fervid Theatre Works was, for these productions, made up of Sean Harper as Lane, Sean Thurgood as Merriman, Emily Duckett as Miss Prism, Shri Zaradkar as Reverend Canon Chasuble, Eve Chatfield as Lady Bracknell, Robin McAllister as Algernon Moncrief, Claire Patterson as Cecily Cardew, Victoria Montgomery as Gwendolyn Fairfax, and Edward Turner as John Worthing. It was directed by myself, Louis Hampton, and Ellie Sewell, with assistant direction from Josh Rising. We've been presenting this show to you from a socially distant perspective because of the current COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. We hope that we've been able to bring a little bit of joy to you in your home from ours, and we hope that if you enjoyed what you saw today, that you'll share our replay when it's published with as many people as you can see, because we want to get this to as many people as we can. One last reminder from me that this is a community-supported project, and if you feel like you want to donate towards further projects that we've, like the one that you've just seen, the donation link is in the description of this video, both on Facebook and on YouTube. One last thing as well, if you enjoyed what you saw and you're interested in perhaps giving us a review, you can leave one on our Facebook page. Just search for Fervid Theatre Works. We've been working on this for 2 months, and we're overjoyed that we've finally been able to put it out there for everybody for the past 3 days. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in on Thursday, Friday, and today, and we really appreciate every single one of you. So thank you all so much, and I hope that the rest of your day is excellent. Take care, everyone.